Welcome to Leadership Unlocked, an interview-style podcast providing insights on how to lead people. Proudly brought to you by Human Interactions Australia. Okay, welcome to Leadership Unlocked. We're very lucky and very fortunate to have a former Australian cricket coach as our guest today in the name of John Buchanan. So, John, welcome to Leadership Unlocked.
Yes, thanks, Craig. Looking forward to having a bit of a chat with you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting some insights to some of the experience. But firstly, what we should do is give you a chance to do a bit of a sales pitch. You're obviously not coaching cricket for Australia anymore. So what are you doing?
Believe it or not, I'm still coaching cricket. This year I've taken on a first 11 team in the local GPS boys competition at Brisbane Boys College. Really quite enjoying being back in the coaching ranks. So that's good. But no, the day job, so to speak, is my business, Buchanan Success Coaching, which really is about taking lessons I learned from that Australian cricket team, which you mentioned, and my previous roles in professional head coaching in cricket, plus all my other experiences, and placing that back out into the corporate world. So really looking into sport and finding, I think, lots of real gems in there that are very, very helpful to people in leadership roles, or indeed in life, because sport, I think, really condenses things that seem to take a long time, certainly in corporate world and sometimes in life, but condenses them into a short period of time. So we really get a glimpse into how things work or don't work, and then provides us with some solutions for whatever current issues that people face.
And how well does the sport experience cross over into corporate?
Well, it crosses over, I think, in a whole range of ways. So certainly from a leadership point of view. So if I looked at myself as a coach, it was about leading a group of people to try and excel in what they did, which their skill was cricket. So excel on the cricket field, both individually and collectively. So that was about just creating a vision for them and with them, and then working out how we were going to get there. Measuring how you get there, having the right people in place, all the right planning, all the right training. So a whole range of systems and processes that went into that. So, yeah, right. You know, that's kind of from the leadership point of view, but all the other pieces that go into the mix of making a successful or very, very successful team.
And which it was. We're talking 1999 to 2007 was when you were coaching. You had some amazing players in their own right.
Yeah,
what's that? Sorry.
There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, like it's hard to fathom actually that team. I think I'm very fortunate enough. I have a cricket bat signed by that team, so I'm not sure it's worth anything these days. But they were a very successful team, a great team. How did you lead a team? Or how do you lead a team? You use the word greatness. How do you lead a team to greatness, do you think? And that's a big question, but...
Yeah. Well, I think the word great is probably an overused term these days. Everything seems to be great sometimes, or it's not great. But in context of this team, I do believe that word sits very comfortably alongside the team because of what it did on the field over a long period of time. But one of the, as I mentioned at the outset, the vision for the team was, well, I talked about Everest. You know, we were going to go on a journey to Everest together. And, you know, I said I didn't know exactly how long or what sort of shape, but the real essence of it was that by the time that we disbanded as a group, we'd be given a label about what we did for the game. And to me, that was about changing how the game was being played. So, and that was through our technical skills or our physical, mental, tactical skills and indeed our team culture. So if we could do those things, then we get some extraordinary results, which we did. And you know, the team was accorded the world's greatest team in 2002 at the Laureate Sports Awards.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
You know, I do think it will still rank as one of the great cricket teams of all time, but certainly one of the great sporting teams of all time. So to get there, well, first, as I said, I think you have to have a very inspiring, aspiring picture about where you want to go, and then you have to be pretty conscious of where you currently are, and therefore then that helps you design strategies to move from current to future. And then the role of the coach in that, and certainly my role, was to constantly provide an environment, a training environment, a playing environment, a coaching environment that was about challenge. It was about stimulation. It was about basically saying, and I wrote a book to this point about if better is possible. So in other words, no matter how well we are going, or poorly, but generally it was how well we were going, there was always room for improvement. There was always another way of doing things, a better way of doing things, both individually and collectively. So that was, I guess, a thread that was woven through, that whole period of time that I was with the team. And we just said we had some incredible players in there. And so even the greats of the game, like a Warner, McGrath, the Pontings and so on, Gilchrist, there was always a way to challenge them. There was always a way for them to improve what they were doing. And even if that was a bit of a challenge to their egos sometimes, that was a useful challenge to sort of, play with, so that when they trained or when they went out in the field, they were always looking to do better. It just reminded me of a final interview I had with when we won the World Cup in the West Indies in 2007. And that was my last game. It was Glenn McGrath's last game. So we were fronting the media, and somebody in the media sort of asked, as the coach, you've always talked about playing the perfect game, and for me, the perfect game would be something like, we designed a plan down to the individual, and basically the plan just followed totally the script, and we got the result that we were looking for. So I said, look, we got close a number of times to that notion of the perfect game, but I didn't think we ever quite reached that. But what I said was we had the perfect team, and that really meant that every person always looked to try to improve themselves, mainly on the field, and hopefully off the field. Sometimes off the field wasn't as good as what we would like as well, but in the main, they were always looking to try and improve themselves, and that really was a key ingredient, I think, into the way that we're able to perform over a long period of time.
I think many significant family businesses and corporate, there's a bunch of egos working in that space as well. Obviously, you had egos galore in there. We won't talk ill of Shane, but he was a special character who contributed a lot to cricket, as it turns out. But how did they accept this idea of being challenged? How did you get around that? Not necessarily specifically, but generally, so other people that are in other businesses can, work that through in their head. How do you get in touch and touch the nerve of a Shane Ward or a Gilchrist and go, hey, we could do this differently, or we could do this better?
Yes, look, probably a range of techniques, I guess. So again, to sort of give you a story which will lead into that, on this last 20 months of the journey to 2007, I'd set them a target of being the first team to score 400 in a one-day international. They became target 400. And so to the group, yes, all the players wanted to be part of that, because that is still part of the ego. To be first at doing something, everybody wants to be part of that. So that was okay. So we're all going to do that. And then they came back. This is over a period of time. They came back at another meeting and said, "Well, but coach, hang on. We're currently scoring, 330 or 340 or 350, whatever our highest score was. How are we actually going to move from that point to this 400? That seems impossible, probably a bit like the 4-minute mile at one point in time." And so it became important then to provide them some information, some data. So I went back and looked at all those games, and then came back and presented to them the fact that in those high scoring games, we were only scoring from about 50% of the deliveries. So there was actually 50% of the deliveries that weren't being scored from. So I said, right, well, why don't we begin to access some of those, 10% of those is going to move us very close to this 400. So again, I think, great, yeah, we've got the solution, off we go. And then, of course, they come back and say, but hang on, we're using all our batting skills at the moment. So how do we do that? And probably not quite saying that as nicely as maybe they were interjecting at the time. But then again, it was about evidence. So I said, well, look, we just don't do a number of our basics very well. And here's one example, which was just running between wickets. So I'd show them some vision about how well one or two might do it, but the rest weren't doing it. So then saying, well, we could access either more runs from existing balls that we're scoring from, or we could access, more balls to score from, because we could improve our running between wickets, and brought in an expert. So that was another means to do that, rather than listening to me, to listen to an expert, which was Dean Jones at the time. And then training that. We actually set up channels for training that, how to run in straight lines, how to run at a certain height, how to power in and out of the crease, so we actually trained that. So playing into those egos, if you like, it's not a one-step fixes all, or a one approach fixes all, and it's not just an approach from the coach. There needs to be a number of other voices in there that are supportive of the concept, or whatever it might be, so that when they have their interactions with other team players, the message is being reinforced in different ways. And so anyway, that sort of played out to the point where
and you had players who jumped on board pretty quickly with that stuff, right? I think people like Steve Waugh and Ricky Ponting were very keen on this concept, weren't they?
Yeah, look, again, one of the important parts of, as you say, dealing with egos and how do you bring people along with you, is certainly to make sure that you key, in a cricket sense, the key leader is the captain, of course, and sometimes the vice captain. So if I didn't have their support, or we were working, in different ways, or not necessarily in different ways, but in different directions, then it would be almost impossible. So, like Stephen had the mantra of taking the road less travelled, which for me was another way of saying, well, let's change the game. Let's not do things the same way as everybody else. Let's look at how we can be ahead of the game all the time. So, and Ricky was very much along the same line, that again, he wanted to be able to dominate his opposition, but to do that, well, we need to be doing things better than, or before than, other teams. So yeah, they're very important. And Adam Gilchrist, who was really an absolute gem of a vice captain, because while he adopted the captaincy role on a number of occasions, and obviously historically was the captain who led us to the 2004 victory in India, he was never one that necessarily coveted the captaincy, but really preferred to be an ideal vice captain for those above him, and therefore a great connector back into the rest of the group, and therefore a really important person to the captain, the coach, and other leaders of the team.
Yeah, that's intriguing, isn't it? And so where did this whole idea of measurement come from? Because if you talked about measuring quite a lot now, and you're really analysing a whole bunch of stuff, like just running towards wickets, or pushing off the crease, or but you've also been accused of over analysing stuff as well. So where does that come from, and what can corporate and family businesses and people out there who are leading teams, what are some of the things you think they should be measuring?
Yeah, look, I guess it was possibly my academic background to some degree. I did a science or a sports science degree, so there was a lot of measurement around biomechanics and exercise physiology and skill acquisition and so on. So there was a bit of a notion, and I always enjoyed maths at school, so there was a bit of a bias towards numbers, but it really sort of became important to me as I did little ventures in coaching, that it just seemed, as players went onto the field, they really had no great concept of, one, their opposition, or two, themselves. You know, it was a bit of a myopic view on the way cricket was going to be played. So I always tried to revert to some numbers which were just facts. You know, that was facts about how somebody might have been playing, or might have been facts about how we were playing. So when I started with Queensland in 1994, you know, one of the things that I needed to do was to say to those who were potentially going to employ me as the coach, because Jeff Thompson had been coaching there for 4 years, was that we were going to change system and process so that we could dominate domestic cricket, and then somewhere in that period of time we would win this Sheffield Shield, the Holy Grail, which had never been done for Queensland anyway at that stage. And so in that first year, one of the real key systems to me was about communication system, if you like. And a communication system is really built upon feedback and analysis. So in other words, if I'm going to provide good feedback to an individual or a team, then it needs to be accurate. And so the classic team meetings were always, you know, you go into a room, you might have some video, but it was very archaic, I suppose, in terms of what it could present. And so to me, what we needed was to enhance all the knowledge and experience and intuition in the room, not replace it, but enhance it with some actual data. So that's when we began the process of inventing computer technology into cricket and into sport. I think at that stage, this is 94, I mean, there was virtually nothing around, certainly in the cricket world, and in most sporting codes. I know in Australia, hockey had just begun to dabble with it. So we began there, and that really got accelerated in that first year because David Parkin with Carlton, they won the AFL flag in 95. And he talked of a couple of things, but one of the things that he talked about was sacrificial players. And I was really intrigued by that and got to meet him and talk to him a bit about it later. And in essence, what that was, you know, traditional numbers in AFL might be kicks, you know, marks, hardball gets, kicks inside 50, you know, every sport has a kind of set of numbers that every coach or pretty well any athlete runs with. But what he did was begin to analyse what he termed sacrificial players, which was the players who, through their discretionary effort, gave their teammates the opportunity to get the traditional numbers, you know.
Right.
But they actually sacrificed themselves, you know, which could be a block, could be a fake lead, or, you know, whatever he wanted.
An assist in soccer, or
yeah. And so in the end, he then said, well, if we committed 64 sacrificial, and I think that was the number, 64 sacrificial players a game, we never lost a game. And so that really accelerated our process, because what we were doing with the numbers was, one, yes, providing better feedback to our own players, but we're really trying to analyse over time trends in the game. And if we could then find certain factors that if we did them, it would guarantee us a win, then that was really always driving me in terms of the search for, you know, what are the key numbers. So go back to your small business owner and so on. I think firstly, they need to be able to capture data about their business and not just about result. You know, like, here's all the results, just like the traditional numbers in sports. So here's our results. That's great. But what is going to lead to those results? What are some of the lead indicators that might tell us that we're on track to achieve whatever it is that we want to achieve by the end of 6 months, or by the end of 3, or by the end of a year, or whatever? And so what are those numbers? And they'll be there. Business owners, just like myself, we need to actually try and work out, well, what are they? Because there's so much data out there. And I think that's the important part for leaders these days, is that there is so much data. How do we actually work out what becomes most important? And to give you another example of that, which was sort of around that target 400. So as a one-day team, we had a mantra around 3 Ps, which was play with patience, play in partnerships, and create pressure. So 3 Ps. And as we know, patience can mean a lot of things to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So and then we had our batting department, our bowling department, our fielding department. So with numbers in mind, and with actually trying to say, well, we need to be clear on whether or not individually and collectively we are playing with patience, then let's find a number that we can kind of all agree on that would be a reasonable indicator. And so, say in batting, basically we would go then for number of balls faced before a wicket was lost. So in other words, if a batsman was able to stay at the crease longer, they should be able to score more runs. You know?
Yeah.
But in isolation, that would be no good, because we might engender a whole range of Jeffrey boycotts. So we've got a lot of people that can stay at the crease but can't score any runs. So therefore, it needed to be in concert or alignment with your pressure, which meant we were going to score off more balls than what we had previously, or we were going to bat in partnerships for longer, and so on. So
I think that's a really interesting and important point, because I know for many years I've been facilitating roundtable discussion groups with CEOs, and often they'll come in and talk about, oh, we're going to do a sales commission, or we're going to, for our sales team, and I go, well, but if you leave that out on its own, there's a whole bunch of stuff that comes around us. So if you get them to try and sell more of this product A, the danger is that they don't sell any of product B or C.
Yes.
And it doesn't really align with the whole goal of increasing sales.
No, that's right. They can, again, as you say, they can just focus in on one particular product and miss many opportunities that might present themselves, because that particular product is of either no interest or, it's the only thing that another business might want. So, there's a lot of other things that go into that, for sure.
Yeah. And, we talk about leaders being coaches. And I've always been curious about a role that you've had and other people like you. How much of it is coaching and how much of it is almost like this CEO or leadership role, rather than, because I don't imagine you stood in the nets with Shane Warne saying, mate, I think you need to get your arm a little bit higher and over your ears more.
No, that's right. But that's kind of part of the leadership and the coaching that overlap, I think. So say you just use that example around Shane. As a leader, I think it's really important to understand that you may not be the right person to intervene at a particular time.
Right.
You need to make sure that your ego is not getting in the road of good decision making and helping an individual. So for Shane, if there was that issue, then it was always, mate, bring in your coach, who was Terry Jenner. And, in conversations with Terry, said, I don't really tell him too much. We might tweak one or two things. But what I do is just probably settle his mind down, and those two had a very, very good and close relationship. And so Terry became a really important person for Shane if he was sort of off the ball, so to speak, So I think that's kind of leadership. Leadership is, you don't have to be the person who has to have all the decisions or make all the decisions or make all the right decisions. But what you do need to do is be able to understand, well, who could do that? How do we harness the collective abilities? Because again, as you said, I played one pretty poor season of first-class cricket for Queensland.
Only 160 runs, wasn't it, Joel? I think. Did I read that?
Thereabouts.
Damn it.
Possibly a few innings. And how am I therefore going to? And I think the other thing about leadership and then about coaching is, I do think you have to have a very good feel for either the industry or the people in the industry, or in my case, the game. That I played a lot of cricket, watched a lot of cricket, so it's not as though I was a complete dummy in that space. But it was important to recognise that the real expertise lay in the dressing room, and e.g. others that might come in, a Dean Jones or a Terry Jenner or whoever it might have been. And so my job was really to harness all that and facilitate all that, so we got the best from it, rather than it being kept by individuals and not shared in the rooms at appropriate times. So the coaching, to me, is just an incredibly powerful tool that leaders need, but probably either don't have the skill or the will to actually utilize it properly.
Yeah. I think the key message there for me is about, don't let our ego get in the way as a coach. I don't have to be the be all and end all of everybody's improvement here. I can use other people, and who've got
that's right,
specific expertise.
That's right, and I mean that makes you quite vulnerable too.
Right.
Because often people will look to you and say, well, tell us what to do. And for me, that in probably a lot of cases, I could probably say, well, this is what I think is really required right at the moment. But from a coach's perspective, I didn't think that was really, that might have helped in the short term, but we're really trying to play both, obviously, the present, but also set up the future. So for me, it was then always trying to get the individual or the group to understand firstly what maybe the real problem is, then what are the solutions. So they needed to own both problem and then solution to that. And my job was to make sure that was occurring.
So you had to sell your idea of this analytic approach not only to Queensland cricket, but then obviously to Australian cricket. Then you had to sell it to the team, who, as we said, were a great bunch of players. It was a big change, and I don't know that it's risky, but it was a big change for these people to take on board, wasn't it?
It is, because again, as was pointed out to me many, many times, coach, you're making the game too complex.
Yeah, right.
It's a simple game. And indeed, they're right. That's 100%. So when a player or a staff member walks onto their field of play, they really don't want to be confused and concerned about a whole stack of numbers or strategies and plans. All they want to do when they walk onto that field is utilise their skills, adapt those skills to whatever's being thrown at them. So in other words, to have a clear mind so that they can make some good decisions and then go about executing that. However, to get them to that stage of walking across the rope and onto the field, then there's important information that they need to try to understand and build into their training so that they're far better prepared to be able to do that. There were some, like Shane Warne, like a Glenn McGrath, who had incredible memories for facts, or not so much facts, but for occasions, for batsmen, for situations that they faced, that was kind of stored in their mind somewhere. And what they were really good at then doing was making sure that, if you like, all other compartments in their life were shut off, but it was only the cricket compartment that was open. And if then they were required to be on the field to bowl or to bat, but mainly to bowl, they were able then to just open up this compartment and search through reasonably quickly, the past and kind of bring that into play for the present. And I don't think, I'm pretty sure Shane never really appreciated that skill that he had, and also then didn't appreciate that other people just didn't have that skill.
Yeah, right.
And so, yes, the coach was kind of complicating it for him in that sense because it was already there, whereas other players just didn't have it, no matter how good they were. And so, again, as I said, what we were always trying to do was provide the most accurate feedback, both in terms of analysis of your own game, but also analysis of our opposition and the trends of the game, so that we, as a collective and individually, were far better prepared to give our best performance when we walk on the field.
We use the DISC tool often for some leadership training and team training, and I think one of the key things of that tool is to understand yourself better before you can understand others around you. And I've seen somewhere you've spoken about that concept as well. Tell me a little bit more about your thoughts around this, understanding self before you can understand others and then change as a team or as a group.
Yes, well, look, two parts, I suppose. One is the job, as I said, about extending and challenging players. It was that I really wanted them, as I said, to own solutions. So I wanted them to be their own best coach. Because when they're out on the field, they've got to make decisions, on the spur of the moment, ball by ball, they're making decisions about what it is that they should do, and then go ahead and execute that. And I mentioned the skills before, the technical skills, the physical, the mental, and the tactical that they need to bring to play in those moments. And so when they perform at their best, the idea is, well, what are you doing across those skills? What's enabling you to get the result, to get your best result, or a PB, if you like, So if the individual can better understand that, then that's their reference point. That's their ability then to actually utilize those skills and put those into play, and gives them a chance of performing at their best. No guarantees, of course, because there are a lot of other factors that can play into that, but there is a guarantee. If they don't understand how they perform at their best, then they won't. So that's the first thing. The second is around the coach and the leader. And for me, and I'll talk about Everett, so the base camp for the leader is your own philosophy, your own values, your own principles, your own cornerstones. And every leader has one, every coach has one, they utilize it every day, but very few have stopped to actually really think about why I do what I do. Why do I say what I say? Why do I respond that way? And of course, coaching and leadership, but coaching is about relationships. And the people that you're coaching or that you're influencing, all they want from you is consistency. Consistency in, John Buchanan is John Buchanan today, and he's John Buchanan tomorrow. Yeah, he might have a different set of clothes on, and might have a smile on his face, or might say certain things, but his messages are consistent. His values are consistent. His principles are consistent. So therefore, for coaches and leaders or owners of businesses, it's just so important that you understand your own value set, your own principle set, and then how you enact that every day. And that becomes your reflection. Yeah, that becomes your reflection, So if I want to review my performance, well, I go back to those reference points. How well did I live me today and deliver that to my staff? And the same for the individual with their skills. How well did I put those skills in place, irrespective of the outcome?
Yeah, wow. I remember chatting with Steve Waugh many, many years ago, when he was playing for New South Wales, and then he was chosen for the Australian team. He said to me that the jump from state cricket to international may not be exact words, but it was massive. It was huge. There was this incredible gap between state and international cricket. And I think that plays out sometimes for people in businesses where they've been a salesperson all their life, and then all of a sudden they become sales manager, or they've been in IT and they become the IT guru, or they're leading a team. How do you help people become successful in that jump and that role? Because you want people to get promoted, but sometimes they fail when they get to that role. And we saw Steve, missed out on the international play for a while there, but then came back stronger. And many Australian cricketers have started and then fallen by the wayside. How do you, as a coach or as a leader, help them to be successful as they take this big leap?
Well, I think ideally you don't make it a big leap. So, that's what everybody talks about, succession planning.
Yeah.
So I think in a business, what becomes important is, say, the salesperson who might be elevated to the sales manager position, then that particular person should be given opportunities to lead certain things before they might take on that major role. They may also step into that role for a couple of weeks if the current sales manager is away on holidays or away sick. So I think if you're kind of running the business and you have that opportunity, you're really trying to increase the experience of that person moving from role A to a more senior role. And of course, that's gradually what happened to Steve Waugh. Over time, with experience, he learned about his game and how his game, and then fitted into international level. But some, as you say, don't make the grade simply because selections and selectors and their own confidence, a whole range of other things, decide for them that, wow, I can't make that leap. So yeah, look, I think there's no replacing experience, but to do that and to fast track that, then I think if there's an opportunity, we need to actually give these people more and more different sort of roles, which is extending them as a person in that decision making and that accountability sort of position, so that if and when they are selected to make that next jump, then at least they have some background, they have some skill, they have some insight.
Yeah.
And then I think, you know, the other parts around it is just good mentorship around them. So whether that's internally or whether that's externally or a combination of both, I think that's really important as part of the learning process. Don't kind of leave people out on a limb and expect them to, you know, to be perfect from day one.
Yeah, some people just don't get given that time or that support at all. I think that's right. So true. And as a leader yourself, in one of the greatest teams ever, I still love my cricket. I haven't played for many years, but I don't sit there and watch it for 5 days. But I do love just sitting down and going to the test match on my own. I don't need anybody else around me. Let me just watch it. Now, I think there's a bit of analytics in there for me. But what would you have done differently, if anything, or what have you learnt as a leader that you think is worth, you know, listeners taking away for themselves?
Hard question, I suppose. But what I did when I first came in was within that Australian cricket side was that obviously I'd been able to observe it a little bit from coaching Queensland and seeing how the Australian team had performed. And I had a few players that were coming backwards and forwards from the Australian team back to the Queensland team and give me some insights. So I had a bit of a view on how the team was operating and how it could operate better. But I took 9 months. I spent the home series. We had series against India and Pakistan, and then we went to New Zealand and again had test and one-day series. And so I took that period of time then to sort of summarise and write down exactly the changes that I thought needed to be made, given I was brought in to, you know, take this team to the new millennium. I think the biggest error I made was that I hadn't really spent any time with the CEO at that juncture. And so he got this report from me virtually cold. You know, he's like, they've done really well. And then suddenly he's come in and said he wants all these changes made. Personnel, system, process, you know, and it didn't get a very good hearing, I must say. And you know, we still performed obviously incredibly well, but I just think it made life very difficult, certainly for me and certainly for a few of the support staff, for a period of time until gradually, probably over a course of 3 years or so, it kind of got better down 3 to 4 years. Yeah. So if there was one thing I would have done differently, and if I was running my own business, then if they have a board, I'd be making it very clear that, you know, I understand the board and their decision-making process. I understand their relationship and I see that, and they've got a good sense of what I'm trying to do, so that when you are presenting something where you do want some major change or you need some increase in resourcing, it's not a big surprise. It's something that's been on the agenda for a while, and whether you get the nod or not, it won't be as fractious anyway. As
I guess it's getting stakeholders aligned with that vision that you have.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So you manage, as you know, you manage down, you manage sideways, and you manage up. So my managing up was probably never a strength, and part of managing up is the politics of your organisation.
Yeah.
You know, some people are very good at playing the politics, others are not.
I'm not either. I'm very, very poor at that. I knew there was a game to play, but I never knew how to play the game.
That's right.
I got
But
myself
that's
in
an
hospital.
important thing to recognise. You know, like that's an important thing to recognise, and it's probably something that I always recognise, that I was never very good at playing politics. So, and if I tried, then one, it was a distraction, but two, I was poor at it. Therefore, I'd never get the result I was looking for. So, I relied on, in the main, players to do that for me. Not overtly. I just needed to do my job really well. And so, when board members and chief executives check in around the team, I was reasonably confident that probably 7 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 players would give me support.
Yeah, fantastic. John, we've run out of time. I feel like I could talk to you for ages, which is amazing. But just to finish off, let's get a bit of insight of John Buchanan, the person. Who's the greatest batsman in the world right now? In your eyes, not analytical, in your eyes.
Right now, whoa, gee. Maybe I'd be leaning to Joe Root.
Yeah.
Just on numbers.
Yeah. Steve Smith's hard to beat.
Well, he's had a hard time over in India, right? Well,
they all have.
The last series. And probably even out here in the last year wasn't quite where he wanted to be, but probably just on numbers right at the moment to be Joe Root.
Joe Root. And a league fan, AFL fan, both?
Well, because I'm from Brisbane, I'm a Union boy and a leaguey rather than an AFL supporter.
Yeah. So you're a big fan of the Reds and the Broncos, or were you following the new Dolphins team?
Oh, what do they call keep your fins up? Well, they certainly kept their fins up in the first couple of games so far.
Different too.
No. Just a fan of any Queensland team. I'm just one of those parochial Queensland boys these days.
That's born and bred that way, I think, you guys.
Well, in the Australian team, I've tried to be quite neutral, believe it or not.
Awesome. John Buchanan, it's been an absolute privilege to meet you and for you to spend some time chatting to me about leadership. How do we contact you?
Look, the best way to reach me is website, which is buchanancoaching.com, or just go to John Buchanan on LinkedIn. They're probably the easiest ways to reach out to me.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time, John. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Craig. Really enjoyed the chat too.